Good morning, Nova Nation. Welcome to San Diego, California for the NCAA Tournament. David Szczepanski with you here on Villanova Sports Talk. And what a few days coming up we have for you. We'll, of course, have coverage on WXVU of the big game tomorrow versus Utah State for the men's basketball team. We'll talk about that coming up in just a little bit, but so much to get to. Of course, we'll get to the poll questions. Got into San Diego late last night. It is 8 a.m. Pacific time here, but excited to be talking Villanova sports with everybody here on a Thursday. Again, David Szczepanski, welcome into Villanova Sports Talk. If you missed any of today's episode, as always, you can find it on Spotify. Also hoping to get this episode up on YouTube. I am recording this from my hotel room, so apologize if there's a little bit of an echo, but it's so great to be with you. And we have so many good poll questions for you today as well. Of course, all designed for the March Madness for the NCAA Tournament. Our first poll question, as always, you can vote on my Twitter at WXVU David S. Who will win Friday's game in San Diego? Villanova versus Utah State. Poll question 2, what will be the result of Friday's NCAA Tournament game between Villanova and Utah State? Villanova wins by 1 to 4 points. Villanova wins by 5+ points. Utah State wins by 1 to 5 points, or Utah State wins by 6+ points. Poll question 3, who will score the most points for Villanova versus Utah State? Tyler Perkins, Duke Brennan, Akaden Lewis, or Devin Askew. Poll question 4, who will win Friday's game in Baton Rouge for the women's basketball team? Villanova or Texas Tech? Again, the Wildcats there are a 10 seed. Texas Tech is a 7 seed. Talk about that coming up. Villanova Sports Talk poll question number 5, and the final one for this Thursday. Which Villanova basketball team has a more favorable side of the bracket to advance in March Madness? Is the men's team or the women's team? We'll talk about that coming up. So again, this episode is going to be heavily focused on March Madness, of course, the NCAA Tournament. We'll break down both the men's basketball game tomorrow and the women's basketball game tomorrow, do a little bit of a preview for the bracket as well, and just kind of take a look at some of the recent results over the last few days. So we're going to get started right away. A lot to get to here on a Thursday, and we're going to begin with Villanova men's basketball, the 8 seed versus the number 9 Utah State Aggies, and this is going to be a game tomorrow, 4:10 p.m. Eastern Time, 1:10 Pacific. We'll have coverage for you on WXVU beginning at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time. To listen to tomorrow's game, I know that a lot of people, of course, love to listen to us on the Radio FX app or on our website. Westwood One has the exclusive internet streaming rights for the game tomorrow, so the Radio FX app and our website will not work to stream the game, but there are 2 ways which you can stream the broadcast tomorrow. One is to listen to the 89.1 FM dial if you are near Villanova within about a 3 to 4 mile radius. You'll be able to hear the game whether you're in the car, in your house, if you just have a radio kind of sitting around, turn it on, power it on, 89.1 FM dial if you're near Villanova. If you are not near Villanova, don't worry, we have you covered. You have to download the Varsity Network app. It is free to download. You don't have to set up any account to log in. The Varsity Network app, it's a Learfield app, completely free, and all you have to do is search for Villanova University. So basically the same thing that you do to find us, to find WXVU on the Radio FX app, you just do on the Varsity Network app. Again, it is free to download on the App Store, Google Play, wherever you can find it, Varsity Network app, and simply just search for Villanova University, and that's how you can listen to us anywhere in this country. So please consider tuning in and sharing that link with your friends as well. So, all right, so Villanova 24-8, 15-5 in conference play. The Wildcats, of course, coming off of a Big East tournament loss to Georgetown, which was a disaster at Madison Square Garden. A 78-64 loss. Georgetown ended up losing the next day to UConn, and it was a really tough performance for Villanova, right? You had a few weeks ago on February 28th, you had the loss to St. John's in New York at the same place, Madison Square Garden. You, of course, lost Matt Hodge due to an ACL injury in that game, and then you bounce back with 2 pretty good performances against DePaul and Xavier, 2 teams, though, that are in the bottom of the Big East, and then playing a Georgetown team that was the 11th seed, but Georgetown upset DePaul on the opening day on Wednesday, and they played well. I give them a lot of credit. I think that Georgetown's offense really was clicking. Julius Halifanoa played really well in that game. He had more than 20 points, almost tied his career high. But Villanova as a team just really couldn't get anything going offensively. And I think when you look at this game tomorrow, this Utah State offense is really, really good. Now, I know what a lot of people are going to say is, yes, it isn't a great conference, right? They did win the Mountain West championship, but, it's not as good as the Big East, right? But, again, this Utah State team, they're able to defeat San Diego State in the Mountain West Championship. So they did receive the Mountain West Championship bid. And this is a team that, has been pretty competitive all season long. I think one of the biggest issues for this Utah State team has just been kind of consistency. We'll talk about that coming up in just a little bit. But I like the way that, Villanova kind of heads into this game, right? The loss to Georgetown is definitely a bad thing. But, they've had, almost a week. Actually, it is a week today. They'll have 8 days heading into tomorrow where they haven't played a game. And, Coach Willard talked about it at the Selection Sunday watch party, how they were going to go through practice, having a normal week. He thought the practices looked pretty good. And I think for Villanova at this point, you kind of just have to forget what happened in the Big East tournament. You flush it very quickly. And Coach Willard said that it was flushed pretty quickly on Sunday. But talking to some of the players, I didn't necessarily get that vibe. I think a lot of the players were still, talking about the loss. And I think it's fair to do so because it was a big disappointment for Villanova at Madison Square Garden against Georgetown, actually a week ago today. So it definitely was a loss that I think a lot of people, were definitely hurt by. I know that it was definitely a shock at Madison Square Garden, but I think where Villanova is having more than a week off, I think that's going to help the Wildcats. And Villanova still hasn't lost back-to-back games all season long. So, if you're a Villanova fan, you're taking a look at that, and I think you have to be pretty happy with the fact that Coach Willard has always had his team ready to go and bounce back after a loss. Now, of course, this is a much different situation, right? Villanova lost to Georgetown, a really disappointing loss to a pretty bad Georgetown team. Yes, they're in the top 100 net rankings, but they're in the bottom of the Big East, somewhat around average. But now Villanova is going to take a Utah State team on that has played really well. Again, Mountain West champions are the Aggies coming into this game. And to take, a deep dive, of course, at Utah State, they are ranked 28th in Bart Torvik. They're very similar in terms of the Ken Pom rankings as well. So in that top 30 echelon, I think that's something to pay attention to. When you take a look at their resume this year, they're 26 in the net ranking. This is a team that is 28-6 overall this season, led by Jarrett Calhoun. And he's done a really fantastic job for the Aggies this season. He was actually named the Mountain West Coach of the Year. This is his second season with Utah State. Originally came from Youngstown State. But again, this Aggies team, 26 in the net rankings, a team that is 4-4 in Quad 1 play, so they have more Quad 1 wins than Villanova does. The Wildcats only have 2 Quad 1 wins. Villanova is 2-6 in Quad 1 games this season. Utah State is 4-4. But the big difference when you take a look at those stats is that Utah State has not played a team better than a net ranking of 43. That was the highest team they played this season was VCU. That was a win at a neutral site, 80-77 against the 43rd in the net rankings VCU. Villanova, on the other hand, when you look at the 8 Quad 1 games they have played, the Wildcats have only played 1 game in Quad 1 opportunities less than a 25 net ranking. So 7 of those 8 Quad 1 games, despite only having 2 wins, have been against net ranking 25 teams or better. I apologize. 2 of them have been below 20, right? So you have the win against BYU, net ranking 23, Wisconsin, net ranking 25, and then you have that win against Seton Hall as well. But 7 of those 8 games in Quad 1 play for Villanova have not been against a team worse than 25 in the net rankings, while this Utah State team has not played a team better than 43 in the net rankings. So despite Utah State having more Quad 1 wins, I don't want to take anything away. I mean, they have still played some pretty good teams, but Villanova's definitely played a tougher schedule in the Big East, of course. And the best win of the season, really, for the Aggies was that win against VCU at a neutral site. They also were able to defeat Boise State. That was a blowout win, 93-68. That was a really nice finish for the Aggies. Then also win against New Mexico on the road, 86-66, and a win against San Diego State. They split the series with San Diego State in terms of away or at neutral sites. So Utah State lost the game away to San Diego State. They won the neutral game and then also won a Quad 2 game at home. And Utah State is also really good at Quad 2 games. The Aggies are 9-1 in Quad 2 games so far this season. Now, they did have a loss to UNLV, who is 111th in the net rankings, but they have some good Quad 2 wins, right? They beat Nevada 71-62. They had a good win against San Diego State at home. That was just on the edge of a Quad 1, Quad 2, ended up being a Quad 2 game as of right now. A win at home against New Mexico by 4 points. So they have some good Quad 2 wins. That's been impressive. Villanova this year is 8-1, so technically Utah State does have one more Quad 2 win than Villanova. And then both teams are sitting with an identical 9-1 record in Quad 3 play. They both have one loss in Quad 3 opportunities. Villanova's loss was to Creighton at home, and the loss for this Utah State team was against UNLV at home. So they lost to UNLV both times this season, and UNLV is not a very good team so far this season. Again, in the 111th of the net ranking, so worse than Georgetown. So Utah State has lost some games this year that they should have won, including those 2 games against UNLV. Those were the worst 2 losses of the season. But this is still a Utah State team that does have some good wins on the resume. I think, the win at the neutral site against San Diego State was impressive. And then also, the win against VCU. VCU is a tough team. They can really shock a lot of people, I think, coming up in March Madness. So, this is a good Utah State team. I think there's a lot of people out there talking about, oh, well, Utah State doesn't come from a great conference, the Mountain West. And you could argue that that's the case, but there's still some good teams, some good Quad 2 games, some good Quad 1 games as well that are kind of teetering on the edge of that Quad 1, Quad 2 opportunities. Now, to take a look at some of the players for this Utah State team that have been really impressive this season, you have to start with MJ Collins Jr. And Collins Jr. has been extremely impressive for Coach Calhoun, and he is just a guy that will score the ball with will. He averages 18 points per game, shoots 37% from behind the arc. He just kind of does it all as a guard. He plays about 31 minutes per game as well, and he's a transfer from Vanderbilt. He's a senior. Like I said, he's a really good three-point shooter, good from the charity stripe as well. Overall field goal percentage of 49%. So he is really the engine that gets this Utah State team moving. And then you also have a guy like Mason Falslev, who has also played some really good basketball this season. He's a 41% shooter as well. He averages 6 rebounds and 16 points per game, and he was the Mountain West Player of the Year, so you could argue that he's even having a better season than Collins Jr., and that's where a lot of the scoring comes from this Utah State team. MJ Collins Jr., Mason Falslev, both of those players are scoring more than 16 points per game. Falslev, 6 rebounds per contest. They're both good three-point shooters, but they also have a pretty good bench. They have Carson Templin, who averages 9 points per game. He's also a good three-point shooter, 35%. And then Drake Allen is also a solid three-point shooter, 32%, 46% from behind the arc with a little bit more than 7 points per game. So you take a look at this roster for Utah State. They don't have a ton of depth after MJ Collins Jr. and Mason Falslev in terms of pure scoring, but they have guys that can make some key buckets. They average 82 points per game overall this season. And I think the most impressive thing, I think, to me for this Utah State team is how efficient they are at offense, right? They shoot 36% from behind the arc, 50% from the field as a team. So this offense really clicks. And according to Bart Torvik, this is a team that is 24th in the country in offensive adjusted efficiency. So one of the best offenses in all of college basketball. And then in terms of efficient field goal percentage from Bart Torvik, this team is 56.6%. 14th in all of college basketball. So again, I think it's easy to take a look at the Mountain West Conference and say that Villanova should win this game coming out of the Big East, but the way that Villanova played against Georgetown, this Utah State team is tough, right? That 8-9 game is always a tough battle. So MJ Collins Jr., Mason Falslev are definitely the 2 players to watch out for. But again, they do have some depth in terms of just players that can pick up and contribute some good minutes. And the thing about this Utah State team is they do run a pretty deep bench as well, right? They have a lot of guys who are averaging, around 10, 15 minutes per game. So Coach Calhoun does, rotate throughout his bench, even though he has the 2 top scorers. And looking in the last game for Utah State against San Diego State, which was the win in the Mountain West Championship, 73-62 the other day on March 14th, this Utah State team had 5 starters, of course, in the starting lineup, but also played 5 players off the bench. So they run about a 10 deep rotation, sometimes even 11 as well. So this is definitely a team that has more depth than Villanova, and I think that'll be interesting to see how Coach Calhoun kind of plays that match. In terms of the win for Utah State against San Diego State in the Mountain West Championship, it was an impressive performance from their top scorers. MJ Collins Jr. had 20 points, 8 for 15 from the field. Mason Falslev had 16 points in that game. Drake Allen at 13. He started in that contest, also had 6 rebounds in that game. And then off the bench, a good scoring from Gary Clark. Again, this is just depth, right? They don't have a ton of guys that can score the ball super easily, but what they do have is a lot of different players that can step in and hit a key bucket when they need. And also, too, I think this is a team that has a different player step up, a different role player step up every game, and that's so important, especially when you get into March Madness, because you're going to have those games where maybe your top scorer in MJ Collins Jr., maybe Mason Falslev doesn't have, the best of performances in the NCAA Tournament, but you still have players off the bench, and that's what helps when you run such a deep rotation, even though a lot of the Utah State players on the bench don't score a ton of points, right? They don't jump off the pages, as a 6th man of the year like a Devin Askew, but they still have players that can rotate and still pick up buckets. Gary Clark was that player last game in the Mountain West Championship against the Aztecs. So again, this Utah State team, they're led by MJ Collins Jr., the Vanderbilt transfer. Mason Falslev has also been really impressive, and both of those players are guards, right? So they do have 2 guards that average about 35 points per game combined, but they also do have some size on this team, right? You have to take a look at Zach Keller, and Keller really didn't play all that well the other day in the championship game, but he's a guy that's got size. He's 6'10", 245 pounds, only averages about 4 points per game, but 2 rebounds per contest. He is definitely physical in the paint. And then you also have a player like Aiden Elliman for this Utah State team. He averages 7 points per game, 3 rebounds per contest. He is 6'9". Now, this Utah State team is not a great rebounding team, right? They're pretty average. I don't want to say they're bad. They're pretty average, about 34 rebounds per contest. Mason Falslev is actually the best rebounder, and like I said, he's a guard, 6 rebounds per game. So definitely that's someone to watch an eye for, or keep an eye out for. But I think when you take a look at this Aggies team, like I said, they're not a great rebounding team, but they do have some size, and it's going to be interesting to see how Coach Willard decides to really draw things up here, because at the Selection Sunday watch party press conference, he had mentioned possibly playing Duke Brennan and Braden Pierce on the court at the same time in March Madness. It seems like that's not the case anymore, so I would imagine that Pierce is going to come off the bench. You have Malachi Palmer at the 4, and Palmer has played well this season, right? I think overall, especially when you take a look at where he was at the beginning of the year and then adjusting to the end of the season. But again, he's not a true forward, and he is a decent rebounder. He is pretty physical, but I just think when you look at it, he's not a Matt Hodge. And I know that people have criticized, Matt Hodge's ability to rebound, especially early on in the year, but I think when he continued to get used to Big East play, he was a much better rebounder down the stretch. So Villanova does miss that, but this Utah State team, like I said, they're not a great rebounding team. They're an okay rebounding team, but Villanova, I think that the key point is the Wildcats really have to do a good job at offensive rebounding. That has been something that Villanova has continued to work to improve on, and I think rebounding as a whole, but offensive rebounding overall this season for Villanova, I think, is definitely something to keep an eye on. And Villanova is 110th in the country in offensive rebound percentage, and this Utah State team is 91st. So very similar in terms of that statistic, and I think that will be something to keep an eye out for. And then Villanova, of course, the free throw shooting, we'll see if that plays a role down the stretch in this contest. But again, this Utah State team, I think my overall message is that, yes, the Mountain West Conference maybe isn't the conference that jumps off the page, but still a very competitive conference. This team has 4 quad 1 wins, technically 2 more than Villanova, despite there being a little bit of a difference between the competition they played. And also, this is a Utah State team, like I said, has played really well in quad 2 games, 9-1. I think it comes down to just consistency, right? They lost to UNLV a couple times this year, a team that is not in the 100th, not in the top 100 in the net ranking. So, they definitely can drop a game if you're able to catch them a little bit slow. And I think also, too, for Villanova, it's going to be how do the Wildcats come out in the first half. It was clear that the other day at Madison Square Garden against Georgetown, this Villanova team did not come out ready to go in the first half. There just wasn't a whole lot of energy in Madison Square Garden. Villanova had, a few days to prepare for that game. I think it kind of caught them off guard a little bit, had to shake off some of that rust, and I think it's something that could be brought up here, right? Villanova had to travel a 6-hour flight. Yes, the team did get in yesterday, going to go through the media day today. And then tomorrow, early afternoon, is the game at 1:10 Pacific. But that's still something to think about, is that Utah State didn't have to travel far. They did get in last night, but didn't have to go that far. They're used to playing at San Diego State, right? They're in the same conference. That's an advantage for them. So Villanova, they have to find out, I think, early how this game is going to go in terms of tempo as well. And that's also a good point in terms of adjusted tempo. This Utah State team is 173rd in the country, according to Bart Torvik. Villanova, of course, is not a team that likes to play fast. Really, when you take a look at things overall this season, Villanova adjusted tempo 307th in college basketball. So Utah State isn't a team that likes to play all that fast either, but definitely plays a faster style than Villanova. So how will the Wildcats counter to that? And then I'll just talk about overall in terms of the offense, right? I think that's where I'll kind of end this discussion. Of course, bring it back up with the poll questions later on in today's show. But this Utah State offense is really efficient, right? 2-point percentage, according to Bart Torvik, 11th in the country. 3-point percentage, 108th, so still above average. Villanova is technically a better 3-point percentage in terms of efficiency shooting team, so that's something that the Wildcats do have going for them. But in terms of 2-point percentage, this Utah State team is about the best that Villanova will play this season. Again, top 15 in the nation at 11th. And Villanova's 2-point defense has really struggled, right? Stephen Kane and I have mentioned that over the last few broadcasts in Villanova Sports Talk. Villanova's 2-point percentage defense in terms of efficiency, 164th in the country. And that number has continued to slide as the season has gone on. That was a big reason why Villanova lost that quad 3 game to Creighton, was the Wildcats couldn't get any stops in terms of 2-point defense. So even though Villanova's defense has played well this season, technically ranked better than this Utah State defense, Villanova has to find a way to stop this offense for Utah State. And again, they don't have a ton of players that, just score a lot of points that jump off the page at you. But when you have two really, I would consider them superstars, especially in the Mountain West Conference, two players that have played just excellent basketball this season, MJ Collins Jr. and Mason Falslev. Falslev, the conference player of the year. They both can shoot the ball well, above 36% from behind the arc. Falslev is 41%. Villanova's defense has to be ready because, if if Collins struggles a little bit, Falsov can step up, and if Falsov struggles, Collins can step up, vice versa. And again, you never know what you can get out of a guy like Drake Allen, who started in the game against San Diego State. He started in all 33 games this season. He's a big piece. And then also Gary Clark, right? He came off the bench. He's a guy that just 1 for 6 from three-point percentage. He doesn't shoot threes, but he does a really good job in the paint. And again, I think that's something that Villanova has to keep an eye on, this offense as a whole for Utah State. And I think also I'll kind of just end things here with my thought in the last game for San Diego State, or I'm sorry, for this Utah State team against San Diego State. In that game, they dominated the paint battle. And again, this is a team that, in terms of the rebounding battle, they're not great, right, in terms of the overall rebounding numbers. They're right there with Villanova, 34, 35 rebounds per game. But what they do a really good job at is being physical. And I think that's something that maybe, again, you look in the Mountain West Conference and you say, well, are teams as physical as they are in the Big East? And I think the overall consensus answer would be no. But this Utah State team is kind of an outlier to that. 73-62 win, like I said, against San Diego State. But when you take a look at the team stats and break down the points in the paint battle, which I think is something to really keep an eye on. Points in the paint for Utah State in the game against San Diego State, 46-22 is a 24-point difference in the paint. So Duke Brennan has to be ready to go. And Brennan has played better bigs than what Utah State is going to throw at him this year. So I do like the matchup for Brennan tomorrow, but I think that Villanova has to be ready, especially at that 4, right? If Malachi Palmer is going to start, seems like he will, of course, again. It seems like they're not going to go with Braden Pierce, even though there was some discussion about that this past weekend. Palmer has to be ready, especially defensively in the paint, to just do whatever he can to contest some of these forwards who do have larger size than Villanova. So again, this game right now it's a toss-up, right? It's an 8-9 game. Villanova right now underdogs by about 1.5 points, but 1.5 points right now. Villanova's underdogs according to ESPN. But this is a game that I overall do like Villanova in this spot. When you just take a look at coming off the losses against Georgetown, they haven't lost back-to-back games this season. I like the way Villanova's defense, despite the loss to Georgetown, is coming into this game. I think they have improved. Again, the 2-point defense is going to be something to watch out for early in this game. I think it really comes down to offense, right? How does Villanova counter this Utah State offensive attack? This game, honestly, is probably going to be in the high 70s, maybe even the 80s. I think this could be a game where you do see a lot of scoring in this contest. And you may say, well, yeah, Villanova's coming off a disappointing performance against Georgetown, but I think when you give Kevin Willard the opportunity to take a look at this Utah State team, what they run defensively, I think Villanova is set up in a pretty good spot here, especially having about a week to prepare for this contest. And again, this Utah State team, they do give about 73 points per game. They score about 82 points per game. So this is a team that can, give up some points. I think especially playing a team like Villanova coming out of Big East play where they have played better defenses, St. John's, UConn, even Georgetown, who has improved slightly at defense this year. I think Villanova should be ready to go in this game. But I think it comes down to that, right? The three-point shooting. Both of these teams are good three-point shooting teams who can really win that margin. Then also turnovers. This Utah State team does not turn the ball over. Only about 10 turnovers per game. They do a really good job at forcing turnovers, 14 forced turnovers per game. I think that's how we'll probably come back to normal because Villanova really doesn't commit a whole lot of turnovers this season, and either does Utah State. So maybe that could be an X factor as well, right? Whoever wins the turnover battle could overall be the winner. But just to conclude things here, again, my keys, if you will, to the game for Villanova, I think the first key for the Wildcats is to find a way to stop this 2-point offense, right? This Utah State offense as a whole is really, really good, but the 2-point offense is really efficient. Like I said, they crushed San Diego State in the paint battle. You can't have that happen again, especially at a court where Utah State is very familiar with. I'd imagine there's going to be a lot of Utah State fans in attendance tomorrow here in San Diego. So find a way to stop the 2-point offense. Again, this Utah State team is a good 3-point shooting team, but I think if you're Villanova, you would feel much more comfortable at trying to keep this Aggies team out of the paint, force them to the perimeter, and kind of beat you in that area, if you will. I think also, too, I'll take a look at the rebounding battle, right? Both of these teams are very similar in terms of rebounding. You have Mason Falsov, who leads the way with 6 rebounds per game for the Aggies. But how does Duke Brennan respond, especially off of the loss against Georgetown, where I thought he did play well, though some of it was kind of in garbage time against the Hoyas in the Big East tournament, but I thought he did play pretty well. And then also Malachi Palmer, too, right? Palmer is seemingly going to start in that 4 spot, so that will definitely be something to keep an eye on. Then I'll just end, the last key to the game here. I think you have to find a way to just limit the turnovers, maybe force some turnovers against this Utah State team. Like I said, they only, commit about 10 turnovers per game. They're not a team that's going to cough up the ball. They did not at all against San Diego State. That was one of the biggest differences in that Mountain West Championship, was that Utah State only committed 6 turnovers. They forced 14. So if Villanova is able to keep that turnover battle close, win the rebounding battle, again, these are some of the keys that you just look at overall this season. But I think they're really stressed with this Utah State team because they have such a good offense. So you have to do the things like offensive rebounding well. You have to do the things like limit turnovers well because this Utah State offense is so efficient, especially this year in Mountain West play. Again, coming off of the Mountain West Conference Championship, the Aggies have won 4 consecutive games against New Mexico, UNLV, Nevada, and San Diego State. Again, this is a Utah State team that did lose to UNLV 2 times this year, so those are the worst 2 losses of the year. Did get a little bit of revenge against UNLV in the Mountain West Conference Tournament, but again, this is a team in Utah State that has not, played all that well this season in terms of just playing consistently. I think that's something to keep an eye on. They haven't played a team like Villanova yet. They haven't played a team above in the top 40 in the net rankings. This will be the biggest test of the year for Utah State. Villanova's already played teams better than Utah State in the net rankings, so I think Villanova's favored to that, but should be a fun one tomorrow, again at 1:10 p.m. Pacific time, 4:10 p.m. Eastern. We'll take a break here on Villanova Sports Talk and be back in just a moment here on WXVU. Welcome back to Villanova Sports Talk from San Diego, California. David Szczepanski with you here on WXVU, and just broke down the Utah State versus Villanova matchup. Again, if you missed any of today's show, you can always listen back on Spotify. Hoping to get this episode up on YouTube as well, and glad you could join us. Before we switch gears to the women's basketball tournament, again, want to highlight that you can vote on the poll questions on my Twitter at WXVUDavidS. I'll talk about them coming up in the late probably 10 minutes or so of today's show. I want to take a look at the bracket first for the men's tournament. Take a look especially at Villanova's West region. So the Wildcats, of course, going to play Utah State tomorrow at 1:10 p.m. Pacific time, 4:10 p.m. Eastern time. Our WXU pregame coverage will begin at 3:30 p.m. Nathan Mather will be on the call of that. Villanova is able to win this game against Utah State. Again, this tough 8-9 matchup. The Wildcats would play the winner of Arizona, the 1 seed, and Long Island University, the 16 seed, the Sharks. And Arizona, of course, 30-point favorites according to ESPN right now in that game. So Villanova right now seemingly, if they're able to win the game against Utah State, would take on Arizona unless there's a monster upset, right, an FDU-like type upset from a few years ago. But not impossible. Arizona, of course, is a really good team. Just looking ahead quickly, if Villanova was able to win this game, Arizona, the 2nd best team according to Ken Pom, 6th best offense according to Ken Pom, 3rd best defense according to Ken Pom, 32-2 overall this season, tied with the same record as Duke. So this is a team that's definitely a powerhouse, right? Heading into that game against UConn in Hartford a few months ago, we had talked about how Arizona was the only team to beat UConn at that point. So this Arizona team is really, really good if they're able to get past Long Island University, and Villanova hoping to find a date with them coming up on Sunday with Arizona. So we'll keep an eye on that. In terms of other teams in this bracket, you have Wisconsin and High Point. That is definitely a game to keep an eye on. Wisconsin, the 5 seed, High Point, the 12 seed. And, for Villanova, that's not a terrible matchup if they're able to continue to advance in the West region, right? If you're able to see, obviously find a way to beat Arizona, potentially you would play Wisconsin. Villanova's already beat Wisconsin this year. You have Arkansas, the 4 seed, versus Hawaii, the 13 seed. Arkansas, big favorites in that game. BYU versus Texas. BYU, just about 2-point favorites against Texas, who won the play-in game the other day for Coach Miller coming back to Ohio. So that was an interesting environment. BYU, the 6 seed, only 2-point favorites in that game according to ESPN, 2.5-point favorites. Gonzaga, Kennesaw State. Gonzaga, the 3 seed. Kennesaw State, the 14 seed. Gonzaga, of course, heavy favorites. And then Miami versus Missouri, that's a good game. Miami, the 7 seed. Missouri, the 10 seed. And then Purdue versus Queens. Purdue, the 2 seed. Queens, the 15 seed. Purdue, about 25-point favorites in that game. You also have St. John's, Northern Iowa. They are here in San Diego. They are in the East region, though. So again, the matchups that I just broke down were all in the West region for Villanova. A win for the Wildcats against the Aggies would send them to play the winner of Arizona versus Long Island in the 2nd round coming up this weekend. All right. Let's turn over our attention to the women's basketball team in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So both of the teams playing decently far away from the main line at Villanova. And the Wildcats will take on a Texas Tech team that's 25-7 overall this season, 12-6 in conference play, finished tied for 4th in the Big 12 this year with Oklahoma State. Did fall behind TCU, West Virginia, and Baylor, but this Big 12 conference is really, really good, right? The Big 12 this year had 8 teams selected to the 2026 NCAA Women's Basketball Championship that matched a league record, which was originally set in 2008. So this is a Texas Tech team that, yes, did finish finished tied for fourth in the conference, but earned a 7 seed because of how tough the conference is, right? The Big East only got 2 bids, UConn and Villanova. This Big 12 conference is 8 teams going to the NCAA tournament. And Texas Tech, though, they have had a pretty good season so far this year. Like I said, they just were ranked in the top 25 in the AP poll that came out the other day. 25-7 overall are the Red Raiders. 12-6 in conference play. 15-2 at home, a team that's been dominant at home. 7-4 away. 3-1 at a neutral site. Bailey Maupin, she is the leading scorer. She averages 15 points per game, 34% from behind the arc this season. And then you also have Snudda Collins. She averages 15 points per game as well, 40% from behind the arc. And then Jalen Bristow is the other scorer averaging double digits for Texas Tech. So 3 scorers averaging double digits. Offense averages about 72 points per game. I think what makes this Texas Tech team really tough is the defense. They only give up 58 points per game. The 3-point defense has been phenomenal this year, holding their opponents to just 27% from behind the arc. Now, it is a little bit of low volume, but still really good percentage in terms of holding their opponents. And then in addition to that, this is also a Texas Tech team that forces a lot of turnovers. Almost 20 forced turnovers this year overall in non-conference play and in Big 12 games. So this is a Texas Tech team that I think is really, really good defensively. Villanova is going to have their hands full with how good this Texas Tech team has been at defense this year. Now, like I said, the offense does average about 70 points per game, but the offense does have some weaknesses, right? They do shoot 34% from behind the arc, which has been impressive this year. They've kept that stat up as well in conference play. But one of the biggest issues that really jumps off the page for me with this Texas Tech 7 seed is that the Red Raiders commit 16 turnovers per game. And if you do that against a team like Villanova that typically doesn't commit a whole lot of turnovers on their own, I think Villanova could be in the driver's seat for this game. And it is right. Villanova's a 10 seed. I mentioned on social media the other day, Coach Dillon, she didn't come out and flat out say it, but you could tell that she wasn't thrilled with the 10 seed just because of the fact that I think, she was talking about her resume, which Villanova's resume has been impressive this year, right? Yes, they have a lot of quad 4 wins, but that's because the Big East doesn't have a ton of great teams, but Villanova defeated West Virginia, who of course is in the Big 12. Villanova defeated James Madison, who won their conference tournament. They play competitively against UConn, Fairfield, Princeton. So this is a team that does have a solid resume. Had 3 wins against Seton Hall, a team that's top 75 in the net ranking. So that I don't think can be discarded as well. So I think Villanova is in, a solid spot heading into this game despite being the 10 seed. And I think one of the biggest things for the Wildcats is the fact that they don't have to play a 1 seed if they win this game, right? Villanova, the men's side of things, if they win the 8-9 game against Utah State, they're most likely going to be matched up against a really good Arizona team. So for the women's team, I think that's a pretty good thing for them that they are in this 7-10 game, because I don't think Texas Tech is an unbeatable team by any means to be able to get to the next round and to be able to take on the winner of LSU and Jacksonville. LSU is about 52-point favorites in that game. Texas Tech, slight favorites, 1.5 points, but Villanova, the 10 seed, I don't think you can count them out. I like this matchup for the Wildcats. Texas Tech, yes, the offense has some big stars as Maupin really leads the way for this Red Raiders team, but like I said, I think this offense does have some weaknesses. I think when you take a look at their ability just to commit turnovers, they're not a phenomenal rebounding team either. I think Danae Carter could have a really good performance, especially if she continues to play like she has the last few weeks, including that great performance against Sarah Strong at the Finn a few weeks ago. Of course, Villanova did lose in the championship to UConn, but Texas Tech, like I said, the offense I don't think is anything great. I don't think it's anything super better than what Villanova's faced this year. I think the difference for Texas Tech, like I said, is just the defense. The defense has been outstanding this year for the Red Raiders, so I think that's going to be the biggest thing. This game could be really low scoring. I think this game could be in the 60s in Baton Rouge. Now, Villanova, the 3-point shooting is going to be the biggest difference, in my opinion, for this game. I think this, just the way this Texas Tech team has played defensively, holding their opponents 27% from behind the arc. Villanova did not shoot the ball well in the Big East tournament in Uncasville. Did not shoot the ball well from behind the arc. Struggled in the game against Seton Hall from 3. Struggled in the game against UConn from 3. So Villanova has to get back into the rhythm of behind the arc. They're a team that depends on the 3-point ball so much, and Coach Dillon had mentioned this team is going to do a lot of shooting drills over the last few days. I think they have to, because they didn't shoot the ball well, like I said, in the Big East tournament, and Texas Tech is such a good 3-point defense that if you're Villanova, the last thing you want to do is have to, struggle from behind the arc less than 30%, have to depend on the paint offense, because Villanova isn't a team that has a ton of size. They don't have a ton of depth. And also, too, Kylie Watson did have a boot on her left leg at Selection Sunday the other day, so we'll see if she is available to play in this game for the Wildcats. Don't have any update in terms of that, but if she's not able to play, that even makes the size situation worse for Villanova, and that means Danae Carter is going to have to stay out of foul trouble in this game against some of the bigs for Texas Tech. Now, when you take a look at Bart Torvik in terms of the Texas Tech rankings, Villanova is technically ranked above the Red Raiders. Villanova 27th in Bart Torvik in women's basketball, Texas Tech number 30. So Villanova, despite being 3 seeds lower, the 10 seed playing the 7 seed Texas Tech, a lot of the metrics favor Villanova heading into this game. So that's why I even like this matchup for the women's team more than I like the matchup for the men's team against Utah State, even though I think both of them have a good chance to advance to the second round. And when you take a look at some more of the stats, right, Villanova, as I said, as a team, 3-point percentage has been crucial. Villanova top 50 in the nation in 3-point percentage efficiency. They are right now ranked 40th in the country. Then when you take a look at Texas Tech, this is a team that's also ranked in the top 50, 48th in the country in 3-point percentage. So who shoots the ball better from behind the arc? I like Texas Tech's defense a little bit better than Villanova's, but I like Villanova's offense a little bit better than Texas Tech. So maybe that kind of evens things out. I think the turnover battle, like I said, is the biggest difference. Texas Tech forces a ton of turnovers. They are top 30 in terms of defense turnover percentage, so I think that's something to watch out for in this game. Like I said, they do commit a lot of turnovers, so that is also something to keep an eye on. If Villanova could force some turnovers, that's going to be crucial for them. The offense, according to Bart Torvik, top 50 in the nation. The defense, top 20 in the nation for Coach Gerlich's squad in the Big 12. Again, 12-6 in conference play this year is Texas Tech, 25-7. But again, 18th best defense in terms of efficiency, according to Bart Torvik, in the nation. The offense, 43rd. I like Villanova's offense. I think they have a chance to score some points. I think it's going to come down to, who can score some buckets late, who can limit the turnovers, and I think it's going to be a really close game. I think this game could even be closer than the men's game when it's all said and done, just because of the fact that I think turnovers are going to be crucial. Both of these defenses have played well this year. Like I said, I could see this game in the 60s with how good both of these defenses have been this year in Texas Tech and Villanova. If Villanova shoots the ball well from behind the arc like they have all season long, besides the Big East tournament, I think Villanova should win this game against Texas Tech and advance. If they do, taking a look at the bracket, they would play the winner, as I mentioned earlier, of LSU and Jacksonville. LSU 51-point favorites. LSU is the 2 seed. Jacksonville is the 5th seed. Also in the bracket, for other games, the women's team for Villanova is in Region 2, Sacramento. You have UCLA versus California Baptist in that bracket. UCLA, the 1 seed. Cal Baptist, the Lancers, are the 16 seed. Oklahoma State versus Princeton. That's a really good matchup. In the 8 seed, Oklahoma State. Princeton is the 9 seed. Then you have Ole Miss versus Gonzaga. Minnesota versus Green Bay. Baylor versus Nebraska. Nebraska, as the 11 seed, is actually 1.5-point favorites, according to ESPN. Then you have Duke, the 3 seed, versus Charleston, the 14 seed. And then, of course, on Villanova's side of things, Texas Tech and Villanova. And then LSU versus Jacksonville. Villanova is able to get past the number 7 Red Raiders. Villanova will play the winner of LSU versus Jacksonville. I like the matchup for the women's team. I gave my answer away according to the poll questions on my Twitter, but I like the matchup for the women's team in this first round more than the men's team, even though Villanova, the women's team, is technically the 10 seed. The men's team is the 8 seed. I think Texas Tech, like I said, their offense doesn't scare me a ton, even though they're coming out of Big 12 play. I think Villanova's played better offenses this year. The defense is the biggest thing. If Villanova can play good defense in this game and find some ways to hit some crucial threes, you look to players like Jasmine Bosco. You look to maybe big threes coming from players like Kennedy Henry as well. I think Villanova's got a good shot. The way that Jasmine Bosco has played over the last few weeks, over the last month and a half, she has taken her game up another notch. So I wouldn't be surprised if she scores 20, 25 points in this game, and maybe she's a majority of the scoring. I think Villanova wants to feed her the ball, especially in a matchup like this against Texas Tech. I think it could come down to the 2 top scorers because I just think it's going to be tough to score a ton in this game. So I think you look to a player like Bosco, especially with Bosco's ability to get the ball down the floor. She's changed tempos at times this year, which has been a difference. She talked about it the other day at Selection Sunday. Villanova's been more aggressive this year. They played a faster tempo than they have in years past. A big reason for that has been Bosco. If Villanova can limit the turnovers, force them on the other end, I like Villanova's chances against Texas Tech. We'll take a break here on Villanova Sports. Our weekend back, we'll of course get to the poll question, continue to talk about men's basketball and the women's basketball teams. It's March Madness. It's March, the NCAA Tournament. Be back in just a little bit, Nova Nation. Villanova Sports Talk here on a Thursday, live from San Diego, California. David Szczepanski with you here on WXVU. About 20 minutes or so left to go with today's show. Again, you can vote on the poll questions on my Twitter at WXVU David S. Villanova versus Utah State tomorrow at 4:10 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, you can listen to that game on WXVU. For the women's team, they will play tomorrow against Texas Tech. Unfortunately, we won't have any WXVU coverage for you of that game in Baton Rouge, but that game will start at 5:30 p.m. Pacific, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, to listen to tomorrow's game here on WXVU, unfortunately, we won't have any coverage on the internet stream or on the Radio FX app, as Westwood One owns the exclusive rights to the NCAA Tournament for men's basketball. So the two ways you can listen to the broadcast tomorrow from Vejas Arena in San Diego, California, is to listen on the 89.1 local FM dial. Very simple. If you're within about 3 to 4 miles of Villanova, you can catch us on the car, at home, really anywhere you listen to radio, you can definitely do that. And then also the other alternative, you can listen to this anywhere in the nation. It is the Varsity Network app, free to download. You don't have to create an account. All you have to do is download the app and search for Villanova University. The link is actually already on, it's on my social media. It's also already on the app, so you can already save that, set it as your favorite, and then have it to go for tomorrow's game on the live broadcast. So again, you can listen on the 89.1 FM dial, and then also on the Varsity Network app, free to download. Please share it with your friends, and I greatly appreciate your support of student radio. All right, about to wrap things up. Of course, overall, again, my thoughts, Villanova, Utah State, my initial reaction just to the matchup on Sunday, I think, was that Utah State was a tough matchup because of where they are in the net rankings, 26th. But I think you do have to take a look at the competition difference. I mean, even though Utah State does have 4 quad 1 wins, Villanova has played better teams this year by a wide margin, especially in quad 1 games. So Villanova doesn't have that big win yet. And I think that's been the knock on Villanova over the last few days, really overall season, has just been the fact that the Wildcats haven't had that quad 1A win, haven't had that big win so far this season. Villanova in quad 1 games, even though originally in the beginning of the season, right, because of how well Seton Hall was playing, Villanova, of course, swept Seton Hall, but with Seton Hall falling down a little bit and some of the other teams, of course, adjusting as the season goes on, the net rankings aren't as good as they were at one point in time for the Wildcats, but they still have 2 quad 1 wins this season against Wisconsin, against Seton Hall, so they haven't had a better win this season than net ranking 25 against Wisconsin, technically at a neutral site. So Villanova, that would be pretty much right around with Utah State at 26. So Villanova, though, looking for that big win, especially on the road, on a neutral site here in San Diego. So that's definitely one of the biggest things for Villanova to watch out for. But I like the matchup overall for the Wildcats. I mean, Utah State is going to be a tough team. I think even though, as I said, they haven't played great opponents, they are the Mountain West Conference champions. You definitely have to account for that. And then you have some good scoring at the top. I like the way Villanova comes into this game, having a week off after Georgetown. Villanova hasn't lost back-to-back games all season. I think this Utah State defense isn't anything great. Villanova should be able to score the ball. I like Duke Brennan in the matchup in the paint, even though this Utah State team does have some size, some physicality. They don't have a ton of scoring in terms of their true forwards in the paint. A lot of their scoring actually in the paint comes from their guards. I mentioned that earlier. So even though Utah State, a really good team in the paint, they won the paint battle against San Diego State easily in the Mountain West Conference Championship. I like the way that Villanova just heads into this matchup in the paint. I expect Braden Pierce to play a good amount tomorrow as well. I wouldn't be surprised if he plays maybe a season high in terms of minutes, just because I think they're going to want to rotate Malachi Palmer out of the game, get some different looks at some of the forwards for Utah State, especially because the Aggies run such a deep bench, right? They ran 10 players in the San Diego State game in the Mountain West Conference. They have a lot of players that average around 10 minutes per game, so they go pretty deep in terms of their bench. Villanova, though, overall, I like the matchup against Utah State. It is going to be tough, probably come down to the wire. That 8-9 game is never easy. And Utah State, they didn't have to travel all that far. So Villanova at a little bit of disadvantage in terms of that category. We'll hear from Kevin Willard a little bit later today. If you're listening to this here on, or if you're here in San Diego or coming out over the next, couple hours, there is open practice today for the media. I'll have coverage for you on my social media, but also open practice for fans just after 1 o'clock at Vejas Arena, San Diego State. So you can definitely come there. I believe it's free to enter. You definitely may want to confirm to check that, but it is an open practice for fans and media just after 1, so I'll have some more quotes from Kevin Willard a little bit later today on my social media. And then, of course, for the women's team, the matchup against Texas Tech, I like that matchup as well. I think that's a more favorable matchup despite Villanova being the 10 seed, Texas Tech the 7 seed. Yes, Texas Tech was just ranked. The Lady Raiders have been really, really good so far this season in terms of the overall record in the Big 12. Again, tied for 4th in the Big 12 so far this season. They have played, a tough schedule, but I think at the end of the day, I like the way that Villanova's offense comes into this game kind of matching up. I think they're going to shoot the ball better after the days of practice they've had, the shooting drills that Coach Dillon has really emphasized in terms of the practices, so that's good. Texas Tech's defense is really going to be the biggest difference, right? How good is this Texas Tech defense compared to Villanova's defense? We'll find out, but Texas Tech, in terms of the metrics, really good are the Lady Raiders in terms of defensive metrics. Bar Torvik, Ken Palm, so defense is the biggest thing in that game. I think you could have a shootout in the game between Villanova and Utah State in the men's side of things. I think it could be a defensive battle, really low-scoring game between Villanova and Texas Tech. They have two really good defenses, and honestly make them down to who can get some late stops in that contest. So let's head over to our poll questions here on WXVU Villanova. Again, we have 5 of them for you here on our Twitter. Again, you can vote on WXVU, at WXVU David S. on Twitter. First poll question for you. Who will win Friday's game in San Diego, Villanova or Utah State? And right now, the poll question coming in pretty easily for those that have voted. 87% saying Villanova, 12% Utah State. I don't think it's that much of separation, right? There's a reason why Utah State is favored in this game. I think a lot of people are looking at the fact they are the Mountain West Conference champions. Villanova hasn't played or hasn't won a game against a really good team so far this season. But I think Utah State, as you know, take a look at the net rankings, very similar to Wisconsin. Villanova defeated Wisconsin at a neutral site. You could argue that without Matt Hodge, Villanova is a worse team, and they are. Overall, you would love to have a guy like Malachi Palmer coming off the bench. It makes Villanova a lot deeper. But I do like the matchup for Villanova. I think it is going to be a game that's probably in the 70s. Utah State's offense, 2-point offense, again, top 15 in the nation. Villanova's offense, I think, is going to respond, bounce back off of that performance against Georgetown. Duke Brennan, I think, is set for a big game. And Tyler Perkins always kind of answers the call when you're in these clutch situations. You saw it in some big games against UConn this year. So I think Tyler Perkins could have a big game tomorrow as well. I don't think it's as much of a difference of 87% Villanova, 13% Utah State. I don't think that's the case, that it's that much of separation. But I do think Villanova should win the game in terms of when you take a look at the metrics. Utah State, again, is a tough team. I think Villanova should be ready to go tomorrow. Poll question 2, what will be the result of Friday's NCAA Tournament game between Villanova and Utah State? A lot of votes coming in here, and it's very close. 41% saying Villanova wins by 5+, 32% saying Villanova wins by 1-4. The rest saying Utah State wins. More people saying that Utah State wins by blowout fashion, 6+ points, rather than a close game, 1-5 points. I'm going to say Villanova wins by 1-4. I think it's a 3-point win at the end of the day for the Wildcats. If I had to put a number on it, I'd probably say 74-71 Villanova. I think it's just going to cross that 70-point threshold, a little bit more of a high-scoring game, maybe get into the upper 70s. But I like Villanova winning this game by 1-4 points in terms of this poll question that I created on my Twitter at WXVU David S. So 41% saying Villanova wins by 5+. It's possible. I think there's a better chance of Utah State pulling away and winning this one than there is Villanova. I think if Villanova wins this game, it's going to be a close, gritty, low-scoring battle. Poll question 3, who will score the most points for Villanova versus Utah State? Tyler Perkins, Duke Brennan, Akaden Lewis, and Devin Askew. I'm surprised that Akaden Lewis hasn't gotten any votes in this poll so far, right? He is a member of the second team in the Big East, and he's coming off of a really good second half of the year, and his freshman campaign just continues to get better and better. Yeah, you're going to look for him as well to limit turnovers tomorrow, right? Utah State is a team that, again, forces about 14 turnovers per game. They forced 14 against San Diego State in the Mountain West Conference. Akaden Lewis has to limit turnovers. That's going to be something to watch as well in this contest. I would say Duke Brennan scores the most points tomorrow. 40% of the votes saying Brennan, 50% saying Tyler Perkins. I think both of the players will have big games, but again, for Brennan, I like the matchup in the paint against Utah State. Now, Utah State, again, their paint offense is really good. They crushed San Diego State, but Villanova, I think, is a better team than San Diego State. In addition to that, Duke Brennan has played better bigs this year. Again, the bigs for Utah State don't have a ton of scoring abilities in terms of just when you take a look at the box score and the cumulative stats this year. But again, they do have some size, so it will be interesting to see what kind of lineup Kevin Willard puts out there on the floor. It seems like it's not going to be Duke Brennan and Braden Pierce on the floor at the same time, despite Willard kind of alluding to that the other day at Selection Sunday. But I like this match for Brennan. And then again, I think Lewis, honestly, I mentioned Perkins earlier. I think Lewis could have a big game as well. Talked to him the other day at the Finn after Villanova was selected on Selection Sunday to play Utah State here in San Diego, and he basically had said that he wasn't sure what Selection Sunday was going to be like, didn't really see the hype around it, but he really kind of bought into it. And Lewis just has such a great internal clock in terms of being able to slow things down, control the pace of the game. Yes, in the beginning of the year had some turnover issues, and I think that's part of the growing pains with a freshman. But Lewis, I think you have to love a player where they're just so calm, cool, and collected in big game situations. And yes, Villanova doesn't have that big win this year, but Lewis, I think when you take a look at Utah State, could match up very well in this contest against the Aggies. So I'll say Duke Brennan officially, but I honestly think Akeda Lewis, Tyler Perkins will also have big games for the Wildcats. And we'll see what the bench can provide with Devin Askew, right? Askew coming off the bench, going to have Braden Pierce coming off the bench as well with Chris Jeffrey. Chris Jeffrey could have some big minutes as well, right? He played a good majority of the first half, well, more than what he has been in that game against Georgetown. So I wouldn't be surprised if Kevin Willard decides to play more Chris Jeffrey in the game tomorrow as well. Poll question 4, who will win Friday's game in Baton Rouge, Villanova women's basketball or Texas Tech? 78% of the voters saying Villanova, 22% saying Texas Tech. I'm also going to go Villanova. Like I said, I'm alluding to the next poll question, but I like Villanova in this spot more with the women's team than I do with the men's team, despite the seeding being flipped, right? The men's team, Villanova is an 8 seed. The women's team, Villanova is a 10 seed. I said it already. This Texas Tech offense doesn't really scare me a ton. I know that they're coming out of a Big 12, a competitive conference, but I think Villanova has a pretty good track record, right? They were able to defeat West Virginia earlier this season, James Madison. Villanova, I think they're going to shake off the shooting rust. They just didn't seem to shoot the ball well in the Big East tournament. They've had some time to prepare. Again, Villanova also a team that's played really well this season off of the loss in women's basketball. So I like the matchup against Texas Tech. I think it's going to come down to defense, but I love Villanova's defense despite Texas Tech being slightly better in terms of the metrics defensively, and I like Villanova's offense better than I like Texas Tech's offense. So for that reason, I'll say Villanova, but they have to shoot the ball well, right? If Villanova shoots under 30% yet again from behind the arc, they're probably not going to win this one. They have to shoot at least in the low to mid 30s to win this game against Texas Tech, against the Lady Raiders. I think they got a good shot to do that. Poll question 5, which Villanova basketball team is a more favorable side of the bracket to advance? The men's team or the women's team? Said it earlier, for me, it's the women's team. 63% of the voters agreeing with me, 37% saying men's basketball. I just think the bracket sets up better for the women's team, right? Because even if you win this game against Texas Tech, yes, you upset the 7 seed, but then you play LSU at 2 seed. If the men's team is able to defeat Utah State, which I don't think is easy at all, again, Villanova underdogs by about 1.5 points, according to ESPN, despite having a better seed than Utah State. Villanova is able to win that game. They're going to take on Arizona. I mean, yes, it would be great if Long Island could pull off a huge upset, one of the biggest college basketball history, if not the biggest. Arizona is just a really good team. Again, second best in Ken Pom. They have a lot of good scoring, and the offense is 6th best according to Ken Pom. The defense has been really strong this year. They played a really tough schedule as well, so they are battle-tested. Arizona is just a really tough matchup if Villanova is able to get past Utah State. Hopefully we're talking about that, right? We have the chance to broadcast another game against Arizona this weekend in San Diego, but I like the matchup for Villanova against Utah State. The matchup against Arizona I think would be really tough for Villanova facing the 1 seed. But again, that's kind of the battle of the 8-9 seed when you're in that game. You have to play the 1 seed most likely unless there's a big upset. So I just think that side of the bracket for Villanova is tough. I like the women's side of the bracket much better. Even though LSU is obviously a very good team, I like Villanova staying away from having to play a UCLA, a UConn, a Texas team early. I like Villanova getting away from having to play some of those number 1 seeds, South Carolina as well, where they were predicted by ESPN a little bit before that. They get a little bit of easier of a draw, assuming LSU is able to win against Jacksonville. LSU is still, obviously a really tough team, one of the best in college basketball, but I think Villanova would have a chance in that game. To say the least, especially if they're obviously able to get past Texas Tech, the Lady Raiders. So again, the men's team taking on Utah State tomorrow here in San Diego, 4:10 p.m. Eastern Time. The women's team taking on Texas Tech in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. That game is at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Unfortunately, we won't have any coverage of the women's game here on air, but again, the men's game, Villanova versus Utah State. Recording this live here in my hotel room here in San Diego. You can catch our action here. 3:30 p.m. will be the pregame show tomorrow. Nathan Mather will lead the coverage back in our WXVU studio. And then again, 4:10 p.m. will be tip-off. Villanova versus Utah State. The Wildcats, the 8 seed. Utah State, the 9 seed. Again, if you're just tuning in, want to learn how to listen to tomorrow's game, or if you're following this on YouTube and skipping ahead to the poll questions, again, you can listen on the 89.1 FM dial tomorrow or the Varsity Network app. Again, Varsity Network app. All you have to do is go to the Google Store or go to the App Store and just search Varsity Network. It's the first app to pop up. Again, it's free to download. You don't need to set up an account. You can if you want, but it's free to do so either way. But you can just press skip, and all you have to do is search for Villanova University. Same thing you would do if you listen on the Radio FX app normally for our WXVU coverage. Again, very simple. Villanova University. Just search for that on the Varsity Network app. The link is already up there. It's shared on social media, so pretty easy to find. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to DM me or message me on my social media. I'll be happy to get back to you, and just really appreciate all the support. Very thankful to be able to be out here in San Diego. A lot of March Madness scenery, of course, left Philadelphia International International Airport with March Madness signage up because, of course, there's teams playing in South Philly coming up over the next couple days, but happy to be here in sunny San Diego. It's hot today, actually, here in San Diego. Pretty humid as well. I wasn't expecting as much humidity here in San Diego, but right now, just about 70 degrees, going up to almost 90 today here in Southern California. So I want to thank everybody for tuning into this episode, regardless if you're watching on YouTube, watching on Spotify, or listening on Spotify, or tuning in live. Really appreciate all the support. As always, you can follow me on my Twitter at WXVU David S. I'll have a ton of coverage coming up for you over the next however many hours we're here in San Diego. But again, Villanova versus Utah State tomorrow at 4:10 p.m. Eastern. I'll see you then, Nova Nation. I'm David Szczepanski. This has been Villanova Sports Talk San Diego edition. It's March, the NCAA Tournament. Have a great rest of your day, Nova Nation. And as always, go Cats!